The rain tapped against the window when Lily woke up that morning, a familiar New York City drumming that usually lulled her back to sleep. But it wasn't the sound of the water that had woken her, but her mother's cough coming from the next room in their small Queens apartment. It was the third night Sarah had spent with a fever. "Mom," Lily called, walking into the small bedroom. The weak light filtering through the cheap curtains revealed Sarah lying down, her face pale, and her hair stuck to her forehead, damp with sweat. She opened her eyes with difficulty. "Good morning, my love." Her voice was faint. "Could you get Mom a glass of water?" Lily ran to the kitchen. At 5 years old, she already knew how to manage on her own when needed. She filled the glass carefully so it wouldn't spill, carrying it with both hands to her mother's room. Sarah took a few sips and lay back down. "Are you feeling better today?" Lily asked, touching her mother's forehead, as she had seen Sarah do for her when she was sick. "I will be," Sarah smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I just need a bit more rest." Lily knew it was more serious than her mother wanted to admit. She had overheard Sarah on the phone the previous night talking to their neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, about not being able to buy the medications the doctor at the community clinic had prescribed. "I'll draw a picture for you," Lily said, going to get her colored pencils. In the tiny living room that also served as a kitchen, Lily opened her school backpack. While searching for her drawing pad, she accidentally knocked over a pile of papers and envelopes Sarah kept on a shelf. Crouching to pick up the mess, her eyes landed on a small wooden box that had fallen from the top of the stack. She had never seen it before. Curiosity won out. Lily opened the box and her eyes lit up. Inside was a gold ring with a small blue stone that sparkled even in that weak light. It seemed magical, like something from a fairy tale. She held it up to the light and noticed something engraved inside. She tried to decipher the letters slowly. Sarah M. Moore. "It's Mom's," she whispered to herself. Lily had never seen her mother wear any jewelry. In fact, they had so little that many times Sarah skipped meals so Lily could eat. Where had this beautiful ring come from? Why was her mother hiding it? A thought crossed her mind, crystal clear. The ring must be worth money. Money enough to buy the medicine. Lily looked toward her mother's room. The door was closed, and she could hear Sarah's heavy breathing. She was finally asleep. Determined, Lily put the ring in the pocket of her coat and quietly grabbed the keys. At the door, she hesitated. She had never gone out alone before. Sarah always said it was dangerous. But now, her mom needed her. She took a deep breath and slipped out into the street. The world outside seemed huge. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray. Lily walked along the wet sidewalks, passing people who barely noticed the small girl on her way to the subway station. She didn't really know where to go. She had heard about places that bought jewelry, but she had no idea where to find them. After a confusing but determined subway ride, she emerged into the chaos of Midtown Manhattan. Shops, restaurants, and people in a hurry. Her eyes roamed over the crowd, looking for someone who seemed kind enough to help. That was when she saw him. A tall man, dark hair streaked with a bit of gray at the temples. He wore a gray suit that looked expensive and carried a leather briefcase. He walked alone, checking his expensive watch, a serious expression on his face. Something about him caught Lily's attention. Maybe it was the way he walked, as if carrying an invisible weight on his shoulders. Or maybe it was just because he looked like he had money, and money was exactly what she needed. Lily took a deep breath and crossed the sidewalk, stopping in front of the man. He almost bumped into her, so lost in thought he was. "Please, sir," her voice came out trembling. "Give me any amount I need to save my mommy." David Sullivan looked down, surprised to find a little girl with brown hair and eyes far too serious for her age. For a moment, he thought about continuing on. He was already late for an important meeting, and the city was full of people asking for money. "I'm sorry, little one, but—" Lily held out her open hand, showing the ring. "Please, it's pretty. It's worth money. My mom is very sick." Distracted, David took the object to look at it more closely, And that was when the world stopped. His fingers trembled slightly as he held the ring. He recognized it immediately. The small blue sapphire, the delicate shape, the inscription inside. He turned it toward the light to confirm what his heart already knew. Sarah M. Moore. The air left his lungs as if he had been punched. Tears sprang to his eyes unexpectedly, and he turned his face away so the girl wouldn't notice, pretending to wipe something off. That name. How many years had passed? 6? 7? A name he had tried to bury, along with all the memories and feelings that came with it. David looked at the girl with new eyes, wavy brown hair like Sarah's, the stubborn jawline. And there was something in her gaze, something familiar that made his heart clench. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice suddenly thick. "Lily," she replied, wary of the change in his demeanor. Lily, a name Sarah had once said she would like to give a daughter. David felt his stomach drop. "And your mom, is she Sarah? Sarah Moore?" The girl's eyes widened. "You know my mom?" David didn't answer. His mind was doing quick calculations. The girl's age, the time since he and Sarah had broken up. "Where's your mom?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "At home. Sick. I wanted to sell the ring to buy medicine." David knelt down to Lily's eye level, holding the ring so tightly his fingers went white. "Take me to her." It wasn't a request. It was almost a plea. Lily hesitated. Her mother had always told her not to trust strangers. But this man knew her mom, and he had sad eyes. Besides, she had already snuck out and had no idea what else to do. Maybe this man could really help. "Is it far?" David asked, already mentally canceling all his day's appointments. "Not too far," Lily pointed. "That way." David took Lily's small hand and let her guide him. With each step, his heart beat faster. The important meeting, the contracts, the empire he had built, all of it vanished from his mind. Now there was only the ring in his pocket and the little girl's hand in his. The route Lily had walked alone seemed much shorter on the way back. Soon they arrived at an old building in Queens with peeling paint and a broken elevator. Lily led him up the stairs to the 4th floor. "Here," she said, stopping in front of a door marked 403. David felt his heart in his throat as Lily unlocked the door. The apartment was smaller than he had imagined. A living room that barely fit a worn sofa and a small table, a tiny kitchen, and 2 doors that he assumed were the bedrooms. "Mom is in there," Lily pointed to one of the doors. David approached slowly. Part of him wanted to run, pretend none of this was happening, go back to his organized, controlled life. But his feet carried him to the door. He knocked softly. There was no response. "She must be sleeping," Lily explained, passing by him and opening the door. "Mom, I brought someone who knows you." The room was small, containing only a bed, a nightstand, and a dresser. On the bed, covered by a thin sheet, lay Sarah. David felt a jolt when he saw her. Thinner than he remembered, her face pale, her hair disheveled. But it was still her. It was still Sarah. She opened her eyes slowly, disoriented by the fever. "Lily, who are you talking to, honey?" Her voice was faint. Then her eyes found David. For a moment, she seemed not to recognize him. Then comprehension arrived, and with it, shock. "David." She tried to sit up, but was too weak. "Don't strain yourself," he said, moving closer to the bed. "Lily found me with this." He showed the ring. Sarah looked at her daughter, confused. "Lily, where did you—" she began, but was interrupted by a new wave of coughing. David didn't need anything else to make his decision. He stepped forward and touched Sarah's forehead. It was burning up. "You need a doctor," he said firmly. "I'm taking you to the hospital." "No," Sarah protested weakly. "We can't afford—" "I'll pay," David interrupted, "and it's not negotiable." He turned to Lily. "Grab some things for your mom. A change of clothes, a toothbrush. Quick." Lily, sensing the urgency in his voice, ran to do what was asked. David looked at Sarah, trying to keep his composure and hide how shaken he was. But seeing her like this, ill in such a modest place, so different from the life he had imagined she would have. And with a daughter who might be— "Why did you come back?" Sarah asked, her voice almost a whisper. David didn't answer. How could he explain that he had never really left, that even after all these years, after everything that happened, her name could still stop his heart? Lily returned with a small bag. "I got Mom's things and the medicine that ran out." David nodded, taking the bag. Then, carefully, he helped Sarah stand. She was far too light, fragile. He lifted her in his arms effortlessly. "Oh, you don't have to," she protested, but her head fell against his chest, too weak to resist. "Lily, open the door," David asked, and the girl ran ahead. They went down the stairs slowly, David carrying Sarah as if she were made of glass. On the street he hailed a yellow cab, which stopped immediately. "To Mount Sinai Hospital," he instructed the driver. During the ride, David held Sarah in his arms. Lily sat beside him, looking worriedly at her mother. A strange family reflected in the taxi window. "Who is he, Mom?" Lily asked in a low voice. Sarah looked at David, her eyes meeting his for the first time in years. "An old friend," was all she said. David felt the weight of those words. An old friend. Was that how she saw him now, after everything they had once been to each other? But he said nothing. This wasn't the time. For now, the important thing was for Sarah to get the medical care she needed. The rest, the questions, the explanations, the lost years, could wait. The taxi pulled up to the hospital entrance, and David stepped out, carrying Sarah, with Lily right behind him. In the emergency room, just a word from him was enough to get Sarah immediate treatment. While doctors and nurses surrounded Sarah, rolling her inside on a stretcher, Lily stayed by David's side in the waiting area. She looked up at the tall, serious man who somehow knew her mother and was now helping them. "Are you going to make Mommy better?" David looked into those big eyes, so trusting, eyes that could be his, in a face that was certainly Sarah's. A strange heaviness settled in his chest, guilt, regret, or something else without a name yet. "I'll do my best," he promised. Sitting side by side in the plastic chairs of the waiting room, David and Lily waited for news. He glanced at the little girl every now and then, looking for traits, confirmations, clues of a truth he still didn't dare to confront fully. Meanwhile, the engagement ring weighed in his pocket, a symbol of promises made and broken, a past he thought was buried, but that now, through a simple encounter on a busy Manhattan sidewalk, had resurfaced and turned his life upside down. David knew nothing would be the same again. The important meeting, his business, the comfortable yet empty life he led, all felt distant now, as if they belonged to someone else. Here, beside this small girl with eyes far too serious for her age, he was back in the only place his heart had truly inhabited, near Sarah Moore. He just didn't know if there would be a place for him in this new life he was discovering, if the mistakes of the past could be forgiven, if lost time could be recovered. But for now, that didn't matter. What mattered was being there, helping in some way. The rest, the truths, the difficult conversations, the uncertain future, would come later. For now, there was only the silent wait and the unasked question hanging in the air. Who was Lily Moore, really? David spent the entire night in the hospital waiting room's uncomfortable chair. His neck hurt and his back complained, but he couldn't leave. Every half hour he'd get up and walk to the door of the room where Sarah lay, just to check if she was still sleeping. Lily had finally fallen asleep next to him, her small head resting on his arm. David didn't dare move for fear of waking her. Looking at that child's peaceful, sleeping face, he saw even more similarities. The shape of her nose, the curve of her eyebrows, features that made him hold his breath. Breakfast was handed out by the hospital staff, and the smell of toast and coffee woke Lily. She rubbed her eyes and glanced around, disoriented for a moment. "Mommy?" she asked, still sleepy. "She's still asleep," David answered gently. "The doctor said she'll be better soon." Lily nodded, accepting the information with a child's simple trust. David offered her a sandwich and a juice he had bought. "Are you hungry?" She took the sandwich, her eyes lighting up, but she didn't bite into it right away. Instead, she looked at the door of the room where her mother was. "Will Mom eat when she wakes up?" she asked. "Sure, they'll bring her food too." Lily seemed uncertain, then tore the sandwich in half, saving a piece in her coat pocket. "What are you doing?" David asked, intrigued. "Keeping it for Mom," she answered, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. "She's always hungry when she wakes up." Something in David's chest tightened. Such a small, automatic gesture. A 5-year-old already so used to sharing everything, thinking of her mother before herself. "You can eat it all," he said gently. "I can buy another one for your mom when she wakes up." Lily looked at him with suspicion, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. "Are you sure? It cost money." "I'm sure," David affirmed, holding back the urge to ask more, to understand how much these two had suffered. As they ate, David tried to find a way to talk to Lily. It was strange. He could negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts without hesitation, but he didn't know how to speak to a child, especially if that child might be his daughter. So he began, clearing his throat. "Do you go to school?" Lily nodded, finishing her bite. "Yes, I do. I'm in pre-K. Mom works while I'm there. And what does your mom do?" "She cleans houses," Lily said, taking a sip of juice. 3 different houses. And at night, after she puts me to bed, she sews things to sell." David absorbed this information like a blow. Sarah, cleaning houses, sewing late into the night to support her daughter. Such a different life from the promising career she had when they met. "And on weekends, what do you do?" Lily's eyes lit up. "We go to the park. It's free. Mom brings a blanket and we have a picnic. Sometimes, if there's extra money, we buy ice cream." She continued excitedly, describing their Sunday trips to Central Park, how Sarah pushed her on the swing, the stories her mom invented about the clouds in the sky. Small moments of happiness that cost nothing. "And on cold nights," Lily went on, "we make a blanket fort in the living room. Mom lights candles because it's cheaper than using the lamp, and we tell princess stories." With each of Lily's words, a new detail of their simple life emerged, of the daily sacrifices Sarah made. David thought of his own penthouse apartment, expensive restaurant dinners, designer clothes. All that wealth seemed empty compared to blanket forts and candlelit princess tales. "Your mom sounds amazing," he said, feeling the inadequacy of his words. "She's the best mom in the world," Lily said firmly. "But she gets sad sometimes." David leaned forward slightly, trying not to appear too eager. "Sad? Why?" Lily shrugged, an unexpectedly adult gesture for someone so small. "Sometimes I wake up at night and see her crying. When I ask what happened, she says she got dust in her eye. But there's no dust at night, right?" "No," David agreed, feeling a lump in his throat. "I don't think there is." "And she keeps a photo in her drawer," Lily went on. "Once I saw it when I was looking for socks. It's a picture of her with a man. They're both smiling a lot." David felt his heart race. He knew exactly which picture it was, taken in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. He had planned to propose to her on that trip, but ended up postponing it, unsure. A mistake that now seemed monumental. "Do you know who the man in the photo is?" he asked, voice nearly a whisper. Lily shook her head. "I've never seen him before. Mom doesn't talk about him." Silence fell between them. David looked at the child, seeing so many of Sarah's features, but now noticing other things, like the shape of her jaw, so much like his own, or how she frowned when she was thinking, exactly like he did. "Do you have kids?" Lily asked suddenly. The question caught him off guard. "No," he answered, feeling the weight of that single word. "I don't. So you're alone?" "Yes," David admitted. "I have a big house, but I live alone." Lily considered that for a moment, tilting her head. That must be sad. "Mom says, we may not have much, but we have each other, and that's what matters." The child's simple words hit David with more force than any eloquent speech could. Throughout his adult life, surrounded by professional success and material comforts, he had never filled the void left by Sarah. He had never found anything that mattered as much as what they once shared. And now, listening to Lily, he was beginning to realize what he might have missed out on. Not just Sarah, but this child, this clever, caring child who saved half a sandwich for her mom and thought blanket forts were magical. "Your mom must be very brave," he said. "She is," Lily agreed proudly. "When we don't have money for the rent, she says she'll figure something out, and she always does. When I get sick, she stays up all night with me, and even when she's really tired, she never forgets to read me a story before bed." With every new revelation, David felt something stirring inside him. Guilt, regret, but also admiration. Admiration for Sarah, for how she had raised this wonderful child alone, facing hardships he could hardly imagine. "And your dad?" The words slipped out before he could stop them. "Do you know him?" Lily shook her head. "Mom says he left before he knew about me." David felt the impact of those simple words. Before he knew about me, meaning Sarah had never told him, never given him the chance to choose, to take responsibility. Or maybe she had tried. Maybe he had been too busy with his own ambition, his own pain after their breakup, to truly listen. "But she says he's not a bad person," Lily added, surprising David. "He just made different choices." "Your mom said that? That he's not bad?" "Yes. I asked once if he was like the villains in stories. She said no, he just chose a different path than ours." David swallowed hard, moved by Sarah's generosity in speaking about him to her daughter. She could have painted a terrible picture, filled Lily with resentment. Instead, she left the door open for the future, for the possibility of redemption. "I'd like to meet him someday," Lily said, fiddling with her juice straw, "just to know what he's like." David couldn't trust his voice to respond. Instead, he just nodded, feeling his heart open in a new, unfamiliar way. That little girl in front of him was no longer just Sarah's daughter, a coincidence or a painful reminder of the past. She was Lily, her own complete person, with dreams and needs and a surprising wisdom for someone so young. A child who had lived with very little, but who understood what truly mattered. A nurse appeared at the door of Sarah's room. "The patient is awake and asking for her daughter." Lily jumped off the chair, excited. "Can I go see Mommy?" "Of course, dear," the nurse smiled. Before entering the room, Lily turned to David. "Are you going to stay here until Mommy gets better?" There was so much hope in that simple question, so much trust in her eyes, that David felt something shift inside him, a decision forming, clear and unavoidable. "I'll stay," he promised, "for as long as it takes." Lily smiled, the kind of smile that lights up the whole world, and then ran into her mother's room, leaving David with his thoughts, his discoveries, and the start of a way back home he didn't even know he was seeking. Sarah settled into the hospital bed, feeling slightly better after the IV medication. The fever had gone down, and her mind was clearer. She looked at Lily, who was sleeping curled up in the armchair by the bed, and smiled. Her daughter, always so strong. She glanced around the room. It was simple but clean and comfortable, better than any public hospital where she would normally be treated. How did she end up here? Her memories were jumbled. She remembered being at home, burning with fever, and then someone carrying her, a familiar voice, a face she thought she had dreamed. The door to the room opened slowly, and Sarah turned her head, expecting to see a nurse. Her heart froze momentarily. David Sullivan stood in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee. Older than in her memories, with a bit of gray at his temples, but undeniably him. The same tall posture, the same green eyes, the same confident air. Except now, there was something different in his gaze, a hesitation she had never seen before. "You're awake?" he said, his voice low so as not to wake Lily. Sarah felt a rush of emotions, shock, fear, anger, and something deeper she refused to name. Her body tensed, hands gripping the sheet tightly. "What are you doing here?" The words came out harsher than she intended. David entered the room, closing the door softly behind him. He kept his distance, as if he knew his presence wasn't welcome. "Lily found me," he explained, his eyes briefly resting on the sleeping girl. "In the street. She was trying to sell this." He took the ring from his pocket and placed it on the bedside table. Sarah looked at the piece of jewelry as though it were a venomous snake. "She shouldn't have done that," she muttered, more to herself than to him. "She was worried about you. She said she needed money for medicine." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the sting of tears behind her eyelids. Of course Lily had done that. Her daughter, always trying to protect her, even though she was so young. "That still doesn't explain why you're here," Sarah said, opening her eyes again, avoiding David's gaze. "You could have called an ambulance and left." David took a step forward, then stepped back again, as if treading on dangerous ground. "You were very sick. Pneumonia, according to the doctors. I couldn't just leave." "Of course you could," Sarah let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You were always good at walking away, David." The accusation hung in the air between them. David didn't respond immediately, taking a sip of coffee to buy some time. "I know you have every right to be angry," he finally said. "I'm not angry." The icy tone of her voice contradicted her words. "It's been so long, I don't even care anymore." A lie. They both knew it was a lie. The tension between them was thick, loaded with years of unspoken words, stored resentments, and unhealed pain. Lily stirred in the armchair, mumbling something in her sleep. Sarah and David both looked at her simultaneously, their faces softening at the sight of the child. "Lily likes you," Sarah said, as if it were an accusation. "She's an amazing girl," David replied sincerely. "Smart, sensitive." Sarah nodded slightly, a brief moment of agreement. "Yes, she is." Silence fell over them again, heavy with everything left unsaid. David leaned against the wall, maintaining his distance but not showing any intention of leaving. "How long?" he finally asked. "How long what? How long after we broke up did you find out about her?" Sarah glanced at Lily, judging whether it was safe to speak. The girl continued to sleep deeply. 3 weeks, she said, voice almost a whisper. "I found out 3 weeks later." David closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the blow. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Sarah felt her anger surge again, a hot wave sweeping everything before it. "Tell you?" She struggled to keep her voice low. "After what you did? After how it all ended?" "I had the right to be respected, to be loved, to not be betrayed," Sarah said, feeling tears threatening to fall, though she refused to cry in front of him. "Don't talk to me about rights, David." He ran a hand through his hair, an expression of frustration she knew all too well. "It was a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life." "Which one? Cheating or letting me go?" The question dripped with venom, and Sarah knew it. But 6 years of raising a daughter alone, of sleepless nights, unpaid bills, and abandoned dreams had earned her the right to be bitter. "Both," David answered in a low voice. "I was young, stupid, and selfish. And I've paid the price every day since." Sarah let out a laugh, cold, devoid of joy. "You paid the price with your penthouse and imported car?" She looked at the expensive suit he wore. "Forgive me if I don't shed tears for you." David didn't defend himself. Instead, he looked again at Lily. "She's my daughter, isn't she?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. Part of her wanted to lie, to deny him that certainty, that connection. But what would be the point? Lily was there, living proof, with her green eyes so much like his. "Yes," she finally admitted, "she's your daughter." The impact of the confirmation seemed to hit David physically. He staggered slightly, leaning more heavily against the wall. "I have a daughter," he murmured, almost to himself. "All this time." "No," Sarah cut in firmly, her voice unwavering. "You contributed genetic material. I have a daughter. I'm the one who rocked her every night. I'm the one who held her hand on her first day of school. I'm the one who worked 3 jobs so she could have the basics." The words were harsh, but Sarah couldn't contain her bitterness, not after everything she'd been through. "You're right," David conceded, surprising her. "You did all of that alone, and I can never make that up to you. But I'm here now." "And what does that mean?" Sarah asked wearily. You think you can just show up after 6 years and suddenly be a father? That you can buy your way back into our lives?" "I'm not trying to buy anything," David said, frustration evident in his voice. "I'm just trying to help. We don't need your help." "Clearly you do," he retorted, gesturing around the hospital room. "You had pneumonia, Sarah." Lily was so desperate that she went out alone to try to sell a ring. Sarah looked away, feeling the sting of truth in his words. Yes, they were struggling. Yes, it had been hard, almost impossible at times. But she had her pride, and it was all she had left after David left. "What do you want, David? Money to ease your conscience? A formal introduction?" "Hello, Lily. Here's your father who never bothered to look for you." "I didn't know," he said through gritted teeth. "How could I look for someone whose existence I didn't even know about?" Sarah closed her eyes, exhausted. The medication still made her drowsy, and this conversation was draining what little energy she had. "Go away, David. Thank you for bringing me to the hospital. But now, leave. What about Lily? What about her? She deserves to know who I am." Sarah looked at her sleeping daughter. Lily always asked about her father. There was always that curiosity in her eyes whenever she saw other kids with their dads, that barely concealed wish to have what other children had. "Maybe," she conceded, "but not now, not like this." David nodded slowly, accepting the temporary defeat. "I'll respect your decision. But I won't just disappear again, Sarah." "You didn't disappear the first time," she corrected. "I sent you away." And with good reason. The pain in his eyes was unmistakable, but Sarah refused to let it affect her. She had spent too long crying over David Sullivan. She had built walls around her heart, brick by brick, year after year. She wasn't going to let him tear them down in a single day. "The doctors said you could be discharged tomorrow," David said, changing the subject. "But you'll need to keep up the treatment at home." "I can't pay for that," Sarah admitted, hating the vulnerability in her own voice. "I've already taken care of it." "I didn't ask." "No," he interrupted. "You didn't. Lily did, and I won't deny her anything." Sarah bit her lip, torn between pride and practical need. For herself, she would have refused any help from David. But for Lily, she swallowed her pride. Just the treatment, she yielded. Nothing more. David nodded, apparently satisfied with that small victory. "I'll let you rest," he said, heading toward the door. "I'll be outside if you need anything." Before Sarah could reply, Lily stirred in the armchair, opening her sleepy eyes. "Mr. David," she muttered, sitting up. "You're still here?" His face changed completely. All the fatigue, all the tension disappeared, replaced by a genuine smile Sarah hadn't seen in years. "I am, Lily," he answered softly. "I was just talking to your mom." Lily turned to Sarah, her eyes lighting up. "Mommy? You're better." "I am, my love." Sarah smiled, opening her arms so her daughter could jump out of the chair to hug her. David watched them from the doorway, an outsider looking in on a world that could have been his. Sarah met his eyes over Lily's head. There was no forgiveness there, not yet. But there was a silent truce for the sake of the little girl they both loved in their own way. "I'll come back later," he said quietly, leaving the room. Sarah held Lily tightly, burying her face in her daughter's hair to hide the tears that finally began to flow. Years of anger and hurt wouldn't vanish overnight, but for the first time there was a small crack in the wall she had built. Tiny, almost imperceptible, yet there. And through that crack, a single beam of light insisted on shining in. 3 days had passed since David and Sarah's confrontation. Dr. Smith had recommended she stay in the hospital a bit longer to ensure the pneumonia was fully treated. David covered the costs of a private room, ignoring her protests. Each morning he arrived with coffee for Sarah and hot chocolate for Lily, leaving the drinks on the bedside table with a polite good morning before stepping out to take work calls. When he returned, he always brought something new. Once it was simple flowers, daisies in a small vase. Another time, a children's book he'd spotted in a nearby bookstore. Sarah received all of it with a cold thank you, but initiated no conversation. She watched, wearily, the interactions between David and Lily. Part of her wanted to ban this closeness, to protect her daughter from potential disappointment. But another part, a part she refused to examine too closely, noticed how Lily's eyes sparkled whenever David appeared. On the afternoon of the fourth day, Sarah was asleep, exhausted from her medication. David slipped quietly into the room, carrying a small bag. "Lily," he whispered, sitting down in the chair next to the bed where the girl was flipping through an old magazine. "I brought something for you." Lily's eyes widened as he took a box of colored pencils and a new sketch pad from the bag. Is it for me?" she asked softly, glancing at her sleeping mother as if afraid the gift might vanish if Sarah woke up. "Of course," David smiled. "I thought we could do some drawing together." "What do you think?" Lily nodded eagerly, accepting the sketch pad carefully, as if it were made of crystal. David noticed how she opened it slowly, savoring the smell of the new paper. "At school, we only have broken pencils," she said, opening the box of colored pencils. "And we have to share the paper." David felt that now familiar pang in his chest. It was as if every new detail of Lily's life was a small blow, reminding him of everything he had missed and everything she had never had. "Well, these are all yours," he assured her. "No need to share." Lily fixed him with a serious look, that same oddly adult gaze he'd seen a few times before. "But I like sharing. I just don't like when other kids break the crayons." David smiled, recognizing in those simple words the generous spirit he had noticed in Lily from the start. "So, what do you like to draw?" he asked, pulling his chair closer. "Houses," Lily replied readily. "I like drawing big houses with gardens." "Let's draw one then." For the next hour they drew side by side. Lily created a colorful house with a garden full of flowers, a swing hanging from a tree, and many windows. David tried to follow her lead, but his attempt clearly showed he was someone who hadn't drawn in decades. "Yours looks funny," Lily remarked without malice, looking at his skewed drawing. David laughed. "I was never very good at this." "That's okay. Mom says we don't have to be good at everything. We just have to try." Again, that simple wisdom caught him off guard. David glanced over at Sarah, sleeping, wondering how many such lessons she had passed on to Lily over the years, lessons he had missed. Lily started a new drawing, her tongue peeking out of the corner of her mouth as she concentrated. David watched her, fascinated by each small gesture, each expression. He searched for traces of himself and found them in the determined way she held her pencil, in the slight tilt of her head when she was thinking hard. "Do you work a lot?" Lily asked suddenly, without lifting her eyes from the drawing. "Yes," David admitted. "Maybe too much." Like Mom, she nodded. "She works too much too. Sometimes she falls asleep at her sewing machine." David glanced at Sarah's hands, noticing for the first time the small marks, needle pricks, calluses from manual labor, hands that had fought alone to build a life for Lily. "Your mother is very strong," he observed. Lily nodded. "She says, 'We have to be strong when things get hard.'" They were silent for a few minutes, only the sound of pencils scratching the paper. David thought about all the times he had complained about work stress, long meetings, tiring trips, while living in absolute comfort. What did he really know about hardship? Lily interrupted his thoughts, looking at him with that serious expression again. "Do you have kids?" The question surprised him, although perhaps it shouldn't have. It was natural for a child to ask an adult, but for David it carried the weight of 6 years of unintentional absence. "No," he hesitated, feeling every heartbeat. "I never did." Lily's eyes, so similar to his, studied him for a moment. Then she gave a sad little smile that made her seem 10 years older. "I never had a dad either." David felt the blow of those simple words. He wanted to say something, anything, but his throat was tight with emotion. "Mom says he left before he knew about me," Lily continued, returning to her drawing as if talking about the weather. "But sometimes I wonder if he'd think I'm nice." David swallowed hard, fighting the impulse to pull her into a hug and tell her everything right then. But he knew it wasn't his decision to make alone. Sarah was right. Lily deserved to know, but not like this, not while everything was so fragile. "I'm sure he'd think you're amazing," David managed to say, his voice a bit rough. Lily smiled, satisfied by his answer. "That's what Mom says too. She says any father would be proud of me." "Your mother's right," David agreed, glancing toward Sarah, still asleep. For a moment, he felt deep gratitude for how she'd raised such a remarkable child, despite all the hardships and despite never telling him the truth. A child who, somehow, hadn't been poisoned against an absent father. "You can be my friend, since you don't have kids," Lily offered, pushing a few colored pencils toward him. "I picked your favorites." David picked up the pencils, blue, green, brown, and realized they were exactly the colors he would have chosen. "Thanks, Lily. I'd love to be your friend." They kept drawing in a comfortable silence, David finding himself relaxing for the first time in days, maybe even years. There was something oddly therapeutic about simply sitting and drawing with a child. No expectations, no pressure, just the present moment. "I'm done," Lily announced, turning the sketch pad to show her picture. It was a house, bigger than the first one, with an even more elaborate garden. But what caught David's attention were the three figures standing in front of the house: a woman, a girl, and a tall man. "Is it a family?" he asked softly. Lily nodded. "An imaginary family. The mom, a girl like me, and—" She hesitated, glancing at David, "someone who takes care of them." David felt something shift inside him, as if a locked door had begun to open. It was no longer just guilt or regret, nor simply the shock of this revelation. It was something deeper, more fundamental, the realization that this child, this little person with her drawings and her gentle wisdom, was part of him. "It's a beautiful drawing, Lily," he said gently. "Can I keep it with you?" "Sure," she agreed easily. "We can make more tomorrow." "Tomorrow and every day you want," David promised. And for the first time in his adult life, he made a promise he was absolutely sure he would keep. On the other side of the room, Sarah opened her eyes briefly, watching the two of them leaning over the sketch pad. She closed her eyes again before they noticed, but a single tear slipped out, sliding silently down her cheek onto the pillow. The world she had built with such care, just her and Lily against everything, was changing, and she wasn't sure she was ready for it. Sarah walked slowly down the hospital corridor, pushing the IV stand with one hand. Dr. Smith insisted she start walking a bit to regain strength, but he warned her not to go too far. After 5 days in the hospital, she already felt trapped within those white walls. The pneumonia was responding well to treatment, but the doctor wanted to keep her under observation for a few more days. Sarah hated hospitals. She hated feeling dependent, hated the smell of disinfectant, and especially hated the constant worry about how she would pay for it all once she left. David had assured her he would take care of the expenses, but that only increased her discomfort. Accepting his help meant opening a door she had kept firmly shut for 6 years. As she neared the waiting area, she heard Lily's laughter. Sarah stopped, leaning against the wall. From where she stood, she could see part of the room without being seen. Lily sat on the floor with David, both surrounded by building blocks he had brought that morning. "No, Mr. David, the tower is going to fall like that," Lily giggled, trying to balance a red block on top of the shaky structure. "You're the expert," David replied, lifting his hands in surrender, his face lit up by a smile Sarah hadn't seen in years. Sarah watched in silence. There was something mesmerizing about the scene. Lily, so at ease with a man she barely knew. David, so patient and attentive to a child who had entered his life so unexpectedly. "Look, it's almost up to the ceiling," Lily exclaimed, standing on her tiptoes to add another block. "Careful," David said, lightly holding her waist so she wouldn't lose her balance. "We don't want you falling and ending up in a hospital bed like your mom." "Will Mommy get better soon?" Lily asked, suddenly serious. "She will," David assured her. "She's strong, just like you." Lily smiled, satisfied with the answer, and returned her attention to the tower. David watched her with an expression Sarah had never seen before, a mix of fascination, tenderness, and something deeper she couldn't name. A nurse walked by in the corridor, noticing Sarah leaning against the wall. "Miss Moore, do you need help getting back to your room?" "No," Sarah said quickly, putting a finger to her lips. "I'm fine, just watching my daughter for a moment." The nurse glanced into the waiting room, saw Lily and David, and smiled sympathetically before continuing on her way. Sarah remained there, motionless. Something inside her was slowly breaking. Not painfully, but more like ice melting after a long winter. Lily said something that made David laugh again, a genuine, carefree laugh that Sarah hadn't heard from him in a very long time. And Lily laughed along, that childlike laughter so pure and bright. The tears came without warning, hot and silent, rolling down Sarah's cheeks. She didn't bother wiping them away as she watched father and daughter together, even though only one of them knew the truth. Sarah felt transported back in time. She remembered the first time she met David in a college bookstore. He had accidentally knocked over a stack of books she was carrying, and instead of simply apologizing and walking away, he insisted on helping her carry them back to her dorm. She remembered their first kiss, nervous and awkward, at her dorm door after their third date. The tiny apartment they rented together in their junior year, so cramped it barely fit a bed, but which felt like a palace because they were together. The memories came in waves now, the plans they'd made. David talking about opening his own law firm, Sarah dreaming about a design career. They were going to change the world, make a difference, build an extraordinary life together. But then, things started to change. David's internship at a major firm, the increasingly long hours, the promotions, the money, the status, all becoming more important than the shared dreams, than their time together. Sarah watched as the man she fell in love with slowly disappeared, replaced by someone obsessed with success and recognition. And then came the betrayal, the accidental discovery of messages exchanged with a colleague, the painful confrontation, the empty apologies, the end. Sarah swallowed hard, the bitter memories threatening to overwhelm her. But then her eyes returned to the waiting area. David was now on his knees on the floor, fully focused on balancing a blue block at the top of the tower, while Lily stood with her hands on her hips, instructing him like a tiny authority figure. This image, this man, kneeling to be at a child's level, listening intently to everything she said, did not match the memory of the ambitious, self-centered David she held on to. It was as if they were two different people. Suddenly, the tower collapsed with a crash, scattering colorful blocks everywhere. Lily stared at the ruins for a moment, and Sarah held her breath, expecting tears. Instead, Lily burst into laughter, throwing herself into David's arms. "Let's build a bigger one," she exclaimed. David hugged her, laughing along, and Sarah saw something in his eyes that took her breath away. Love. Pure, simple, unconditional love. The kind of love that doesn't ask for anything in return, that comes without conditions or expectations. 6 years. Sarah had kept father and daughter apart for 6 years. At the time, she thought it was the right decision. David had made it clear that his career came first. What kind of father would he be? What kind of influence would he have on a young child? But watching them now, Sarah wondered if she had made a mistake. If, in her pain and anger, she had denied Lily something precious and denied David as well. Lily deserved to grow up knowing who her father was. And what if David had changed? What if he could be the father Lily deserved, the father Sarah never imagined he could be? The new tower was climbing higher now, this time with a broader, more stable base. Lily and David worked together, focused, speaking quietly. It was all so natural, so right, it hurt to watch. Sarah remembered the guilt she felt when she discovered her pregnancy, how she briefly considered telling David, giving him a chance to be involved. But then pride took over, and fear too. Fear that he would reject the child as he had rejected their relationship. Or worse, that he might want to be present only part-time, showing up when convenient, disappearing whenever work called. Was it better for a child to have an absent father, or to know of a father who was never really there? Sarah chose the first option, convinced she was sparing Lily disappointment. But had she been unfair? David had never had a chance to choose. He never knew he had a daughter until he literally ran into her, holding the engagement ring he had once placed on Sarah's finger, along with promises he failed to keep. In the waiting area, the new tower was almost as tall as Lily. She took a step back to admire it, tripped on a loose block on the floor, and started to fall. David reacted instantly, catching her before she hit the ground. "I've got you," he said, holding her firmly. "Will you always catch me when I fall?" Lily asked, looking at him with eyes so much like his own. David hesitated only for a second. "Whenever you need me, Lily, I promise." Sarah brought her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. The tears now flowed freely. In that moment, she knew something had changed inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but an openness, a willingness to consider that there might be a place for David in their lives. Lily deserved to know her father, and maybe, just maybe, David deserved to know his daughter. The block tower eventually toppled again. Lily and David began gathering up the pieces for another attempt, laughing and talking as if they had known each other their entire lives. Sarah slipped away quietly, returning to her room. Her heart felt heavy, but somehow lighter at the same time. 6 years of certainties were beginning to crumble, just like the tower of blocks in the waiting room. When David brought Lily back to the room later, Sarah didn't pretend to be irritated as she had on previous days. She didn't make any cutting remarks about how long they'd been gone. Instead, she just listened as Lily excitedly described the towers they had built. "Mr. David said we can build an even bigger one tomorrow," Lily finished, hopping onto the bed beside her mother. "That sounds like fun," Sarah said softly, surprising both Lily and David with her positive response. You don't mind if I come back tomorrow?" David asked carefully, keeping his distance from the bed. Sarah looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time in days. The man before her wasn't the same one she had left 6 years ago. There were new lines on his face, a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had always been there, and she had been too busy looking at other things to notice. "Lily would like that," she answered simply. The smile that lit up David's face was genuine, reaching his eyes, completely transforming his features. Sarah felt a strange pang in her chest, realizing how long it had been since she'd seen that particular smile. "Then I'll come back," he promised. After he left, Lily looked at her mom curiously. "You're not mad at Mr. David today?" Sarah gave a faint smile, stroking her daughter's hair. "No, honey. I'm not mad." "He's nice," Lily stated with the simple directness of childhood. "He really listens to me, like you." Sarah felt tears threaten again, but she held them back. "Yes," she agreed, "he does seem to really listen." Later that night, after Lily fell asleep in the armchair beside the bed, Sarah lay awake, thinking about a past she couldn't change, about a present that was shifting before her eyes, about a future that, for the first time in years, felt uncertain in a way that wasn't entirely terrifying. David would return tomorrow, and maybe she would be ready to start letting him into their lives. Not for her sake. Her hurt and anger were still there, the wounds still real. But for Lily, for that laughter that had echoed in the waiting room, for that promise. "Whenever you need me, Lily, I promise." Life had a strange way of turning things around. 6 years ago, Sarah had vowed David Sullivan would never be part of her life again. Now, lying in a hospital bed, she was beginning to accept that he might already be part of the only life that truly mattered, Lily's. And as frightening as it was to admit, that idea didn't seem quite as terrible as before. Sarah was discharged from the hospital after 10 days. The doctors insisted she still needed rest, but at least she could recover at home. David arranged everything: a car service, the medication, a nurse who would come twice a day to administer the IV she still needed. The small apartment felt different when they arrived. There were flowers in a simple vase on the table, the fridge was stocked, and the place was spotlessly clean. "I asked a cleaning crew to come yesterday," David explained, carrying Sarah's small bag to her room. "I thought it'd be better for you to return to a fresh space." Sarah only nodded, too tired to argue. The past weeks had been an emotional whirlwind, and she was physically and mentally exhausted. "Lily, why don't you show David your room while I rest a bit?" Sarah suggested, noticing the barely restrained excitement on her daughter's face. "Can I?" Lily asked, looking between her mother and David. "Sure," David smiled. "I'd love to see it." Sarah watched them walk away, Lily tugging David by the hand toward the small bedroom she decorated proudly with magazine cutouts and her own drawings. Over the past few days, Sarah's resistance had lessened considerably. Seeing David with Lily triggered contradictory emotions: jealousy, fear, but also an unexpected relief at not carrying the burden alone anymore. She leaned back on the couch and closed her eyes. She could hear Lily's excited voice as she showed off her treasures to David: colorful stones she collected, the worn books she reread constantly, the small teddy bear missing an eye that had been her companion since she was a baby. At some point, Sarah dozed off. When she woke, the sky outside was already dark. Voices came from the tiny kitchen, and the smell of homemade food filled the apartment. Careful with the hot water, she heard David say, "Here, hold it by the handle." "Like this?" Lily's voice replied. "Perfect. You're a great kitchen helper." Sarah rose quietly and walked to the kitchen door. David and Lily stood side by side at the tiny stove. He had tied an improvised apron around Lily, who could barely reach the counter even standing on a chair. They were making pasta, apparently, with Lily in charge of stirring the sauce under David's watchful eye. The scene looked so domestic, so normal, that Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. Was this how it should have been? A family cooking dinner together, sharing little moments? "Mommy," Lily called, noticing her. "We're making a surprise dinner." "I can see that," Sarah said with a slight smile. "Smells delicious. David taught me how to make real tomato sauce, not the stuff from a jar." Sarah noticed the absence of Mr. before David's name, a small change indicating how comfortable Lily already felt with him. "I hope you don't mind," David said, a hint of nerves in his voice. "I figured you both needed a decent meal after all those days of hospital food." "It's fine," Sarah replied, surprised at the sincerity in her own voice. "Thank you." They ate at the small kitchen table, Lily dominating the conversation with school stories and questions for David about his travels, his job, his apartment. Sarah mostly stayed quiet, observing the interaction, how David never mentioned money or status in his answers. Instead, he told funny stories about places he'd visited, people he'd met, lessons he'd learned. After dinner, Lily asked to watch a cartoon on the small TV in the living room. Sarah agreed, and soon the girl was completely absorbed in her favorite show. David began washing the dishes, and Sarah, without much thought, picked up a towel to dry them. They worked in silence for a few minutes, moving carefully in the cramped space. "Sarah," David finally broke the silence, his voice low so Lily wouldn't hear from the other room. "We need to talk." Sarah felt her body tense, but nodded. She knew this moment would come eventually. They'd avoided serious conversations the past few days, focusing on her recovery and Lily's well-being. "I know," she replied simply. They finished the dishes in silence. Sarah peeked in on Lily, still captivated by the cartoon. "Let's go into the hallway," she suggested, grabbing her keys, "so we can talk without her hearing." The hallway of the building was empty and quiet. Sarah leaned against the wall opposite the apartment door, leaving it ajar so she could still hear if Lily called. David stood in front of her, keeping a respectful distance. In the confined space he seemed even taller, but his posture was cautious, almost hesitant. "Lily is my daughter, isn't she?" he asked directly, but there was gentleness in his tone. Sarah looked down at the floor. Even though they'd touched on the subject at the hospital, she had never given a clear, final confirmation. Part of her still wanted to protect herself, protect Lily, maintain control over the situation she had managed alone for so many years. "Sarah, please," David urged softly when she stayed quiet. "I need to hear you say it." She raised her eyes to meet his. "Yes," she finally said. "Lily is your daughter." David closed his eyes for a moment as though absorbing the final impact of that truth. When he opened them, they were moist. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" His voice was a rough whisper. Sarah felt the old hurt rising up, years of pain and resentment she'd tried to bury for Lily's sake. "You weren't good to me, David. You didn't care. You cheated on me. Several times." The words spilled out like water from a dam finally breaking. "I loved you, but eventually I couldn't take the pain anymore, the loneliness in that relationship." She took a deep breath, fighting back tears threatening to fall. "Shortly after, I found out I was pregnant. I decided to raise Lily alone. I didn't want her to go through what I did." David reeled as if physically struck. Tears began falling down his face, and he made no effort to hide them. "I had the right to know," he said, his voice trembling. "Regardless of what happened between us, I had the right to know I had a daughter." "And she had the right to have a present father," Sarah countered, her own voice wavering. "Not someone who'd put her second, like you did with me." David ran a hand over his face, wiping away tears. "How could you be so sure I'd do that? You never gave me a chance to prove otherwise. I had 6 years of experience with you before she was born, David. You already showed me your priorities." A heavy silence fell between them. David stared at the floor, shoulders slumped. "I was young and stupid," he finally said, "obsessed with success, with recognition. I thought I was building something for us, but in the process, I destroyed what we had." He met Sarah's eyes, which were red with unshed tears. "I'm not excusing who I was. There's no excuse for what I did to you. But Sarah, if I had known about Lily, I would have changed. I would have tried, at least." There was a sincerity in his voice that made something inside Sarah falter. "You can't know that," she said, more softly. "No, I can't," he agreed. "But I know who I am now. And I know I would give anything, every cent, every achievement, to have been there for her first steps, her first words, to have known her from the start." Tears streamed down his face now, and Sarah felt her own slipping free. "I've lost 6 years of her life," David went on, voice choked. 6 years I'll never get back. I'm not blaming you. You did what you believed was right to protect her. But I'm asking, no, I'm begging you, don't make me lose any more." Sarah closed her eyes, torn by conflicting emotions. The old hurt, the fear of being hurt again, the protective instinct for Lily. But there was something else now. The image of Lily laughing with David, the way her eyes lit up when he appeared, the genuine care he showed. "I don't know if I can trust you," she admitted. "Not with me, at least. But maybe with Lily." The relief on David's face was palpable. "That's all I'm asking for," he said, "a chance to be the father she deserves. I won't let her down, Sarah. I won't let either of you down." "Don't make promises you can't keep," Sarah warned. "This is one I intend to keep with every breath I have," David replied, an intensity in his voice that surprised her. What neither of them realized, focused as they were on their emotional conversation, was the small figure standing by the slightly open apartment door. Lily had quietly left her cartoon, drawn by the voices in the hallway. Her big green eyes, so much like David's, were wide, absorbing every word of the revelation that would change her life forever. Lily retreated silently, unnoticed by the adults. Her small steps made no sound on the hallway carpet as she re-entered the apartment, her child's mind trying to process what she had just discovered. David, the man who had shown up so suddenly in their lives, the man who built block towers with her and told her stories, the man who made her mom cry when she thought no one was looking. He wasn't just a family friend. He was her dad. Lily glanced at the drawing she had made earlier, a make-believe family in front of a house. Now everything made sense, and yet none of it made sense. She picked up her small blue backpack, placed her one-eyed teddy bear inside, and silently slipped out the back door of the apartment, which led to the fire escape. Maybe if she found the place where she had first met David, she could better understand what was happening. David and Sarah stayed in the hallway a few minutes longer, each of them absorbing the weight of the conversation they'd just had. An odd tension hung between them, not anger, but a different kind of intensity. The truth was out, and there was no going back. "We should go back," Sarah finally said, wiping the last traces of tears. "Lily will wonder why we're taking so long." David nodded, following her back into the apartment. Sarah opened the door, expecting to see Lily still engrossed in her cartoon. The TV was on, but the living room was empty. "Lily?" Sarah called, heading to the small bedroom. "Honey?" No response. David stood in the living room as Sarah checked the bathroom, then the kitchen, her worry growing with every passing second. "She must be hiding," Sarah said, her voice revealing the first hints of panic. "Lily, this isn't funny. Come out." David started searching, too, looking under the table, behind the sofa, in the kitchen cupboard, anywhere a small child might hide. "Lily," he called, his own voice starting to sound alarmed. It was Sarah who noticed first. The small blue backpack Lily always kept by the door was gone, and the one-eyed teddy bear she never left behind was missing as well. "The back door," Sarah gasped, racing to the kitchen. The door leading to the fire escape was unlocked, ajar. The cold night air blew in, gently moving the curtains. "Oh my God," Sarah muttered, her blood turning to ice. She left. Lily went out on her own. David froze for an instant, comprehending what that meant. A 5-year-old, alone in the city at night. The terror of it made him react immediately. "We'll find her," he said, his voice firm despite the rising fear. "She can't have gone far." Sarah was already throwing on her coat, moving with a speed that ignored her recent illness. "She heard us," Sarah said, the horrible realization hitting her like a punch. Lily must have heard our conversation in the hallway. David felt the weight of that thought. His daughter, the daughter he just discovered he had overheard everything. The confirmation that he was her dad, the accusations, his tears of regret. How would she, at 5 years old, make sense of it all? "You take the front of the building. I'll go down the fire escape," David instructed, already heading to the kitchen door. "Call the police while we look." Sarah nodded, grabbing her phone with shaking hands. All the distance, all the coldness she had shown David for weeks was gone. Now they were just two terrified parents, united by the fear of losing their child. David descended the metal steps, calling Lily's name with each landing. The night was cold, the sky overcast with dark clouds threatening rain. He tried to banish terrible thoughts from his mind. Lily, lost and frightened, or worse. "Lily!" he shouted, his voice echoing in the alley behind the building. "Lily, please, it's me, David." In the silence that followed, he realized David meant nothing special to her. Until a few hours ago, he was just a friend of her mother's who had suddenly appeared. Lily. I'm your dad." The words sounded strange in his mouth, but also strangely right. "Please, where are you?" Out in front of the building, Sarah ran from one side of the street to the other, asking everyone she encountered if they'd seen a small girl with wavy brown hair carrying a blue backpack. Most simply shook their heads sympathetically and went on their way. Some promised to keep an eye out. An older man mentioned seeing a child walking alone toward downtown, but wasn't sure if it was a girl or a boy. Sarah felt desperation grow with each passing minute. Her chest hurt, not from her recent pneumonia, but from the terror gripping her. Lily was her entire life. The idea of losing her was unthinkable. The police finally arrived, asking questions, taking notes, requesting a recent photo. They promised to start searching immediately, but their professional expressions didn't hide the seriousness of the situation. A little child alone at night in a big city was high priority and high risk. David and Sarah found each other again in front of the building, both out of breath and red-eyed. "No sign of her in the back," David reported, running his hand through his hair in despair. "But I think I know where she might be." "Where?" Sarah asked, seizing any thread of hope. She might have gone back to where we first met, the main square where she approached me with the ring. Sarah considered the idea for a moment. It made sense. Lily had a surprisingly good sense of direction for her age. She knew how to get to school, to the park, to the corner store, and she knew how to reach downtown, as they occasionally went there for free events or just to walk around. "It's possible," she agreed, already moving in the direction he indicated. "Let's go." They ran side by side through the streets, stopping at each corner to check in every direction, asking anyone they saw if they'd noticed Lily. The rain began to fall, softly at first, then heavier, making the search even harder. "She'll be soaked," Sarah said, her voice breaking with worry. She didn't even take a raincoat. David took off his own coat and handed it to Sarah, who was shivering from both the cold and fear. "We'll find her," he promised, though the dread in his eyes belied the confidence in his tone. They pressed on, both drenched, desperation growing with every minute that ticked by. The police were searching too, with patrol cars roaming nearby streets and officers on foot checking alleys and parks. When they reached the main square, David spotted something. A small figure sitting on a bench in the rain, hugging something against her chest. Even from a distance, he recognized the wavy brown hair, now plastered to the little head by the downpour. "There!" he shouted, pointing. "It's her!" Sarah looked where he pointed and started running, David right behind her. Lily lifted her head at the sound of their familiar voices. Her face was red and puffy from crying, and she clutched her teddy bear, now completely soaked. "Lily!" Sarah called out, her voice choked with relief and fear. "Oh my God, Lily!" The girl didn't move from the bench, watching them approach with wide eyes. There was confusion in her gaze, mixed with a deep sadness, far too heavy for such a small child. Sarah reached her first, dropping to her knees in front of her, frantically checking if she was hurt. "Are you okay? Are you hurt? Why did you run away? Don't ever do that again." The words spilled out in a torrent, mingling worry, relief, and anger. Lily just looked at her mother, then at David, who had stopped a few steps away, unsure what to do. The rain poured down on all three of them, but none seemed to notice. "Why did you lie?" Lily finally asked, her tiny voice barely audible over the rain. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah felt tears mix with the rain on her face. How could she explain something so complicated to a child who was only just beginning to understand the world? "Oh, Lily, I'm so sorry," she began, uncertain how to continue. David stepped forward, then knelt beside Sarah, bringing himself level with Lily. Rainwater streamed down his face, but he didn't seem to care. "It was my fault," he said, his voice surprisingly clear despite the emotion. "I hurt your mom a long time ago, before you were born. She was trying to protect you from me." Lily stared at him intently, her green eyes, so much like his, shimmering with tears she hadn't yet let fall. "Are you really my dad?" she asked outright. David felt his heart clench. "Yes," he answered simply. "I am your dad." Lily hugged the teddy bear tighter. "Why didn't you come see me before now?" "Because I didn't know about you," David replied honestly. "If I had known, I would have come. I would have been here from the beginning." Lily looked at Sarah, who nodded through trembling lips. "I didn't tell him, Lily," she admitted, "and that was wrong. I should have told him. So I'm sorry." The child processed their words, her little face revealing a comprehension beyond her years. Finally, she looked back at David. "Are you going away now that you know?" she asked, fear evident in her voice. "No," David answered firmly, reaching out to gently touch her face for the first time as her father. "Never. I'll never stop looking for you, Lily. I won't leave." Something in his unwavering tone seemed to break Lily's last resistance. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing into his chest. David held her tight, tears running freely down his cheeks, blending with the rain. Sarah watched for a moment, feeling a whirlwind of emotions, relief, guilt, fear, and something dangerously close to hope. Then she joined the embrace, wrapping her arms around Lily from behind and placing her hands on David's arms. For a brief moment, they were a single unit, united by the child between them, by the storm drenching them, by the mutual fear they had just faced. The rain began to subside, but none of them moved. Lily eventually pulled back a little, looking up at David with eyes far too serious for a 5-year-old. "Are you going to do to me what you did to Mommy?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Are you going to make me suffer too?" The question hit David like a physical blow. It was so direct, so raw, and so heartbreakingly perceptive from someone so young. He felt Sarah tense beside him, probably wondering how he would answer. David knelt there in the rain, ignoring the water soaking through his clothes, gazing directly into her eyes, the eyes that mirrored his own. "Never, Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion but steady in conviction. "I can't change what I did, but I promise I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be better for you." Lily placed her small hands on his cheeks, studying his face as though searching for any hint of a lie. What she saw must have satisfied her, because slowly a shy smile appeared on her lips. "I always wanted a dad," she said simply. David felt his heart break, and then somehow mend in that single instant. "And I always wanted a daughter," he replied. "I just didn't know it until I met you." Sarah watched them, feeling both part of the scene and an outsider. Years of hurt and fierce protection wouldn't vanish overnight. But seeing David and Lily together, seeing the instant and deep connection between them, she started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, it was time to let go of the past. "Let's go home," she said softly. "We're all soaked, and Lily needs a warm bath." David looked at her, surprised and grateful at once for that implied inclusion. "Let's," he agreed, picking Lily up easily in his arms. As they walked back, Lily's head resting on David's shoulder, her hand firmly holding Sarah's, the rain finally stopped. The clouds began to clear, revealing a starry sky above them, the first clear night in a long time. The apartment was quiet when they returned, everyone drenched and emotionally exhausted. Sarah took Lily straight to the bathroom, filling the tub with warm water, while David phoned the police to say they had found her. "They said they'll send someone to verify she's safe," David reported when Sarah came back to the living room after tucking Lily into bed. "Thank you," Sarah said, rubbing her tired eyes, "for calling them and for helping find her." An awkward silence fell between them. The desperate unity they had shared while searching for Lily was gone, replaced by uncertainty now that the immediate crisis was over. The truth was out in the open, and there was no turning back. "What happens now?" David asked quietly, mindful not to wake Lily. Sarah looked out the window, watching the raindrops still sliding down the glass. "I'm not exactly sure," she admitted, "but I know Lily needs stability right now. She's confused, scared." "I want to be in her life," David said resolutely. "I want to know her, support her, be present." Sarah turned to face him, her expression a mix of complex emotions. "Lily deserves that," she agreed. "She deserves to have her father in her life. But David, you and I need time. Time to trust that you won't vanish when things get hard. Time to believe Lily really is a priority to you." David nodded slowly, accepting her conditions. "I understand," he said. "And I'll prove it, Sarah. Day by day, I'll prove I can be the father Lily deserves." The police arrived shortly after, confirming that Lily was safe and offering advice on dealing with the trauma of the incident. David stayed until Sarah fell asleep on the couch, too exhausted to move to her bed. He covered her with a blanket, checked on Lily one last time, and left quietly, promising to return in the morning. In the weeks that followed, a new routine began to form. David showed up every morning before going to the office, bringing coffee for Sarah and helping prepare Lily's breakfast. At first, the interactions were tense, guarded. Sarah watched his every move, every word spoken to Lily, as though waiting for him to show his true colors. But that moment never came. Instead, David started rearranging his life around Lily. He canceled business trips, delegated major tasks, arrived at the office later, and left earlier. His phone, once constantly in his hand, remained forgotten in his pocket whenever he was with his daughter. "Don't you have to be at work now?" Sarah asked one afternoon when David showed up to pick Lily up from school, something he'd begun to do regularly. "We rescheduled the meeting," he replied simply. "I promised Lily I'd take her to the park today." Sarah studied his face, looking for resentment or impatience. She found none, only genuine determination, and, surprisingly, a sense of peace she had never seen in him before. Over time, Sarah's defenses slowly came down. She allowed David to take Lily for entire afternoons, then an entire Saturday, eventually even a weekend. He never disappointed, always punctual, always attentive to Lily's needs, always respectful of Sarah's boundaries. 1 month turned into 2, then 3. Winter gave way to spring, and with the changing season, something also began to bloom among the 3 of them. David met Lily's teachers, memorized the names of her friends, learned her favorite foods and which bedtime stories she loved. He discovered she was terrified of cockroaches, that she loved strawberry ice cream, that she dreamed of having a dog someday. Every new detail was a precious treasure, each moment spent together helping fill the void of lost years. "Can I talk to you?" David asked Sarah one Sunday afternoon while Lily played with other children at the park. Sarah nodded, sitting beside him on a bench. "I want to thank you," he said, surprising her, "for giving me this chance, for not shutting me out completely, after everything." Sarah watched Lily running around, her laughter reaching them even from a distance. "I didn't do it for you," she answered honestly. "I did it for her." "I know," David said, "and that's why it means so much. You put her happiness above your own feelings about me." Sarah looked at him, truly looked, noticing the subtle changes the past months had brought. The worry lines around his eyes had softened. His gaze, once often distant, was now present, focused. He somehow looked younger, lighter. "She loves you," Sarah said simply. David's face lit up at those words. "I love her too, more than I ever imagined possible." 4 months after the night Lily ran away, David showed up at the apartment with a proposal. "I found a bigger place," he said, showing photos of a spacious 3-bedroom apartment in Westchester County. "I thought maybe you two would like to move. It's closer to Lily's school, there's a park out front, and enough room for everyone." Sarah looked at the photos, feeling that familiar impulse to retreat and protect her hard-earned independence. "David, I'm not suggesting we live together," he clarified quickly. "The apartment has a separate entrance for the back section. It's like 2 connected apartments. You and Lily would have your own space, and I'd have mine. That way, Lily wouldn't have to choose between us. She could have both parents nearby." The idea was tempting. Sarah's current apartment was too small and not ideally located. Her health had improved, but medical bills had drained all her savings. "I'd pay my share," she stated firmly. "I never doubted you would," David said with a small smile. When they told Lily about the idea, her enthusiasm was immediate and boundless. "Are we going to be like a real family?" she asked, her eyes shining. Sarah and David exchanged uncertain looks. "We'll be a family," David said carefully. "Maybe not in the traditional way, but still a family." That seemed to satisfy Lily, who immediately began making plans for her new room. Moving day came on a sunny summer Saturday. Sarah's friends helped, along with some of David's colleagues, who volunteered to carry the heavier furniture. By evening, exhausted but content, the 3 of them sat on the floor of the new living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes, eating pizza straight from the box. "I like it here," Lily declared, looking around with approval. "It feels right." Sarah watched her daughter, noticing how different she seemed compared to a few months ago. Her smile was back to full force, her eyes sparkled with renewed confidence. The shadow of insecurity that had hovered since the night she ran away had finally lifted. Then she looked at David, who was telling Lily how they could plant flowers on the small balcony. He had kept every promise he made. He had reorganized his entire life around Lily. No complaints, no hesitation. He respected Sarah's limits, acknowledged her fears, and patiently worked to prove he could be trusted. He wasn't forgiven, not completely. The wounds were too deep to heal so quickly. But for the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to consider the possibility that people could change, that the past didn't have to define the future. "What do you think, Sarah?" David's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Roses or daisies on the balcony?" "Daisies," she answered, meeting his gaze. "They're tougher." David smiled, understanding the unspoken message. Later that night, after Lily finally fell asleep in her new room, Sarah found David in the kitchen, finishing up putting dishes away. "Thank you," she said simply. David turned, surprised. "For what? For not giving up? For proving I was wrong about you?" David shook his head slightly. "You weren't wrong. I was exactly what you said I was. But I'm not that person anymore." Sarah nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to see that. It wasn't full forgiveness, nor reconciliation. It was something simpler, and perhaps more important. Recognition. Recognition that people can change, that mistakes can be repaired, that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt slowly, carefully, day by day." Lily had two parents now, two imperfect adults learning to set aside their own wounds for her sake, two adults who, despite everything, still remembered why they had once loved each other. And that, for the moment, was enough. 6 months had passed since the move to the shared apartment. A comfortable routine had set in, with David living in the rear section while Sarah and Lily occupied the main area. The wounds of the past hadn't disappeared, but they were healing, day by day, moment by moment. Lily was the center of this new arrangement, flourishing with both parents present in her life. Her smile was back at its brightest, and she spoke excitedly at school about my dad, words that still sounded strange yet wonderful to David every time he heard them. It was on a seemingly ordinary Wednesday that something changed. David was helping Lily with her homework at the kitchen table while Sarah cooked dinner. His phone rang, and Sarah watched surreptitiously as he checked the number and answered. "Sullivan," he said, his tone instantly shifting to the professional, confident David she remembered from years ago. "Yes, I see." "No, that's excellent news." Sarah continued chopping vegetables, pretending not to pay attention, but noticing every subtle change in his expression and the contained excitement in his voice. "We can close the deal tomorrow." "Great. I'll be there at 9 dial." He hung up, a discreet smile on his lips. "Good news?" Sarah asked casually, dumping the vegetables into the pot. "You could say that," David replied, looking at her with an unreadable expression. "Sarah, would you have dinner with me tomorrow night?" "Just the two of us." The question caught her off guard. Over the past months, they'd formed a cordial, sometimes friendly relationship, but always with Lily as their focal point, the bridge between them. They rarely spent time alone. "There's something important I want to talk to you about," David added, seeing her hesitation. "I can stay with Mrs. Johnson, their neighbor, Chloe's mom," Lily interjected, revealing she was listening despite appearing focused on her homework. "She said I can visit her kitten any time." Sarah and David exchanged a small, amused look at their daughter's convenient suggestion. "All right," Sarah finally agreed. "Tomorrow night." The next day, after dropping Lily off, Sarah waited in the living room, feeling uncharacteristically nervous. She had chosen a simple dress more out of a desire to break from routine than for any other reason she was willing to admit to herself. David arrived on the dot, also dressed with more care than usual. He took her to a small, cozy Italian restaurant in Little Italy, nothing like the ostentatious places he used to frequent in the past. "You look lovely," he commented after they ordered, left alone with 2 glasses of wine. "Thank you," Sarah replied, taking a small sip to hide her discomfort. "So, what did you want to talk about?" David smiled, recognizing her impatience. Straight to the point. "Some things haven't changed." "Some things don't," she agreed, a slight smile curving her lips involuntarily. "And others change completely," he continued, meeting her gaze over the rim of his glass. "We have changed, Sarah." A comfortable silence settled between them, not the awkward silence of their early encounters, but something calmer, like a pause between movements of a familiar piece of music. "We really have," Sarah finally said. "I never imagined we'd be here, talking like friends." "Neither did I," David admitted. "But I'm grateful we are. Grateful you gave me the chance to know Lily, to be part of her life." Sarah studied his face, noticing the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes, the extra gray at his temples. This wasn't the brash, impatient young man she once knew and loved. He was a different man, more mature, more grounded. "What happened to you, David? In those years we were apart?" The question emerged naturally, without accusation, just genuine curiosity. David looked down at his wine for a moment, as though searching for the right words. "After we ended, I threw myself even deeper into work. I built my career, made money, earned recognition." He paused, a sad smile touching his lips. "Then one day, sitting in my office, after closing the biggest deal of my career, I realized I had no one to celebrate with, no one who really cared." Sarah listened intently, finally hearing the other side of the story they once shared. "It was like waking from a trance," David continued. "I realized I'd lost the only person who truly mattered to me, chasing things that in the end brought no real happiness." "And then you found Lily," Sarah said softly. "And then I found Lily," he agreed, emotion evident in his voice, "and discovered what really matters." Their entree arrived, interrupting the conversation. They ate in silence for a few minutes, each digesting the words that had been exchanged. "What about you, Sarah?" David asked eventually. "How were those years for you?" Sarah drew a deep breath, sorting out her thoughts. "Hard," she admitted, "but also full of joy, because of Lily. She was my strength when I thought I couldn't keep going, my light in the darkest days." David nodded, understanding. "I'm sorry you went through it all alone," he said sincerely. "If I had known—" "But you didn't know," Sarah interrupted gently. "And I chose not to tell you. We both made mistakes, David, yours before, mine after." "Can we move on?" he asked, vulnerability clear in his eyes. "Not to forget the past, but maybe to forgive it? To make the most of what we still have?" Sarah felt intense emotion at his words. Forgiveness was a journey she was only beginning. "I'm trying," she answered honestly. "Day by day. Watching you with Lily, how you've changed for her. It helps." David smiled, a smile that reached his eyes. "I have something to show you," he said, subtly shifting the topic. "After dinner, if you don't mind." They finished the meal talking about lighter things, shared memories, funny stories about Lily at school. It was surprising how, despite everything, there was still comfort in each other's familiarity. After dinner, David drove them to a quiet neighborhood in Westchester, lined with neat houses and tree-lined streets. He stopped in front of a 2-story house with a large front yard and a welcoming porch. "What is this?" Sarah asked, puzzled. "Come see," David replied, stepping out and opening the car door for her. Intrigued, Sarah followed him to the front door. David pulled out a key from his pocket and unlocked it, motioning for her to enter. Inside it was spacious and welcoming, soft-colored walls, light hardwood floors, a large living room with a fireplace, an open kitchen with a central island, big windows that would let in plenty of natural light. It looked perfect, though unfurnished. "It's beautiful," she commented, still confused. "But I don't get it." "I bought this house," David explained, watching her reaction carefully. "For you both, so Lily can have a yard to play in, so you can have space to work on your designs, and so we can have a new start." Sarah felt her heart race. "David, I can't accept this. It's too much." "I'm not giving it only to you," he clarified. "I'm giving it to us, as a family. Not as a couple, but as Lily's parents. She deserves to grow up in a place like this." He guided her through the house, pointing out the rooms, explaining his ideas. Upstairs, he stopped at a closed door. "This would be Lily's room," he said, opening it. Sarah held her breath. Unlike the rest of the empty house, this room was fully decorated. Light pink walls, a carriage-shaped bed, a built-in bookcase filled with colorful books, neatly arranged toys, and a row of teddy bears of varying sizes and colors. A large window overlooked the backyard, where a swing hung from a big tree, waiting for a child's laughter. "You did all this?" she asked, deeply moved. "I wanted it to be perfect for her," David replied. "For both of you." Sarah walked around the room, touching the books, feeling the softness of the teddy bears. Every detail had been chosen with so much care, so much love. "There's a room downstairs that could become your design studio," David went on. "And the main bedroom is yours, of course." "What about you?" Sarah asked, finally finding her voice. "There's a small guest house out back," he explained. "I'd stay there, close enough to be in Lily's life, but still giving you both the space and privacy you need." Sarah didn't know how to respond. The gesture was overwhelming in its generosity, and frightening too. "Don't say anything now," David suggested gently. "Think about it. Talk to Lily." 2 weeks later, on a sunny Sunday afternoon, the move was complete. Sarah had accepted the offer under the condition that she would contribute financially once her small design business became profitable. Lily was overjoyed with the new house, especially her dream bedroom. That was where David found her, sitting on the backyard swing, slowly swaying while holding something in her hands. Approaching, he saw it was the old engagement ring, the one Lily had tried to sell when everything began. "What are you doing with that, Princess?" he asked, sitting on the grass beside the swing. Lily looked at the ring, turning it in her fingers so the small sapphire caught the sunlight. "I was thinking," she answered, her voice quiet yet earnest. "About what?" "How everything changed because of it." David glanced at the piece of jewelry, recalling the day he bought it, filled with hopes and plans. He never could have imagined the journey that little object would set in motion. "I think you're right," he agreed. "It really did change everything." Lily slipped off the swing and sat down next to her dad on the grass. "Dad," she said suddenly, "there's a girl in my class, Chloe. Her mom's sick, like Mom was. She's really sad." David studied his daughter, curious where she was going with this. "That is sad, sweetheart." Lily opened her hand, showing him the ring resting on her palm. "I want to give this to her," she declared, "so she can sell it and help her mom, like I tried to do." David felt a lump in his throat at his daughter's innocent generosity. "Lily, that's very kind, but the ring is worth a lot of money. Maybe we can help Chloe in another way." Lily shook her head, determined. "It has to be the ring. It's magic, Dad. This ring saved my mom, and it saved you too." David didn't know how to respond. His daughter's childlike perspective carried a deep truth he couldn't put into words. From the porch, Sarah watched father and daughter together. She walked over slowly, curious about their intense conversation. "What are you two up to?" she asked, stopping next to them. Lily eagerly explained her plan to help her classmate, showing the ring. "Are you sure, Lily?" Sarah asked, surprised by her daughter's intention. "That ring is part of our story." "Exactly," Lily insisted. "That's why it needs to help someone else now, to write a new story." Sarah and David exchanged glances over their daughter's head, both touched by the unexpected wisdom of this small person they had raised. "If that's what you want, then we'll do it together," Sarah agreed. Lily hugged her mom, then her dad, and skipped back to the swing, the ring firmly in her hand. That left David and Sarah side by side in the sunny backyard. "She's incredible," David remarked, watching Lily swing happily. "Yes, she is," Sarah agreed, her eyes fixed on her daughter. A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind of silence only possible between people who have shared so much pain and so much joy, so many mistakes and so many chances at redemption. "You've changed, David," Sarah finally said in a gentle tone. "I can see it. It's still not easy, but I'm willing to let you stay close, for our daughter's sake." David nodded, too moved to speak at first. When he found his voice, it was filled with sincerity. "It's more than I deserve," he said. "And I'll do everything I can to be worthy of this chance you're both giving me." "Mom! Dad!" Lily called from the swing. "Come push me." They looked at each other again, sharing a small mutual smile. They weren't together as a couple. That story ended years ago. But they were together as a family, united by the love for the little person calling out to them. Side by side, they walked towards Lily, toward a future they were building step by step, choice by choice. An imperfect, complicated future, yet a real one. A future healed by their decisions, shaped not only by past mistakes, but by present commitments. True love can be quiet, later, and filled with flaws. But when it finds courage, it rebuilds homes, heals wounds, and transforms what remains into something new and profoundly beautiful. And that, for them, was enough. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next.